Hello and welcome to the VandySports podcast, part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee, joined by Billy Derrick and Luke Wyatt. Today, we're recording this on a Wednesday morning. We got all kinds of stuff to talk about and not nearly enough time to talk about it in, so we'll try to pace that accordingly. I think, see the mailbag? It's the why shouldn't we fire everybody edition to the mailbag? So we'll need to leave some time for that. We also have had football and basketball games played since we last did this as a threesome here. And I saw a baseball scrimmage. I don't know if I'll have time to talk about that or not, but we'll do the best we can. A reminder, our show presented by the Wash House. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do the things you truly enjoy? Let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you with 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area. Just drop off your dirty laundry, and their professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, and that is your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh, and clean laundry ready to be put away. Check them out at washhouseclean.com. Stop in today, get your time back. Stephen Andrews is a good friend of mine. That's his business, and they are our sponsor for basketball season, which we'll get to shortly. Luke appears on our guest line. We will discuss, again, those major topics. Our guest line is brought to you by the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Studio, presented by the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, a family-owned third-generation milk and ice cream distribution company located in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. They serve Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama, Chattanooga, North Georgia. I could tell you the details about that. They do supply Mayfield, Nestle, and Haagen-Dazs ice cream. But, boy, purity ice cream, boys. Fans need a lot of that right now. Been a tough week. Seems like we've been saying that a lot. Homemade vanilla, if that's your thing, that is one of the outstanding flavors. Anyway, support those products. Help out those who help make this show possible. All right, guys, we've got 40 minutes and not nearly enough time to talk about all the stuff we need to talk about. I'm going to start here. The most recent event, a basketball game last night. Vanderbilt hangs on and beats UNC Greensboro. I was writing a national story on that one. It's got to be balanced on both teams. And one thing that occurred to me, I write about runs and this happened and that happened, and these were the key moments. I think every time Vanderbilt did something to respond or got a lead or went on a spurt, I'm not kidding. Ezra Mannion's name was mentioned in there every time. We talk about Tyron Lawrence maybe as the preseason second-team All-SEC guy. His absence is certainly hurting the team. I thought before the season Ezra Mannion might be their best player. And look, we don't have Tyron Lawrence to counter that right now to make a counter argument. But, man, that guy was look, they sat him for 16 minutes against Presbyterian. They weren't good enough to win that game without him. I think his presence in the game they won last night and the game they lost where he was sitting on the bench says everything you need to know about what's driving this team. Billy, I'll let you start there.
Yeah, 24 points, 12 for 12 from the free throw line, Chris. I thought that number was huge. I think he made all of his free throws as well against USC Upstate, and that's the biggest improvement from one offseason to another for him. I mean, he wasn't a shooter last year. I mean, I think late in the season he came on and he was making some mid-range shots. But even from the free throw line, he wasn't consistent enough. And, the assist to turnover ratio as well, 4 assists, only 2 turnovers. So Chris, you're right. Mannion is the straw that stirs the drink. And I think what fans are hoping for is that when Tyron Lawrence comes back, that spot is filled and that backcourt is finally what Vanderbilt fans are excited to see. Right now, they're just kind of surviving. I think that was a huge win, right? If you drop that one, fans are starting to sit around saying, okay, where's the hope for this season? So to win that one, I think Luke was big because you roll into Vegas now. You got a team on Friday that you can and should beat. And quite frankly, you need to beat handily. That's what I tweeted last night. I said they're going to have to start increasing their margin of victory. That's a huge metric in the net. They haven't done that. They didn't do that last year really much, and they haven't done that this year. So that's the only thing I think that they've got to focus on, really dominating opponents. Maybe not in Vegas, but when they have the chance to, Luke, I think that's what this team should be focused on.
Yeah, I agree. And without Ezra, this team's probably 0-3.
I agree.
Paul Lewis has not played well, I don't think, yet. He's trying to find his stride. I think Isaiah West has done what you expected Isaiah West to do. And then without Tyron, I don't know who of the three they would have beaten. Now, last night, you guys say what you want. I think UNC Greensboro is a good basketball team.
Yeah.
They will win a lot of games in their conference, may win their conference. I don't know everybody in their conference. But we have a situation when we get Van Allen Lubin back and Tyron, and I know there'll be a little rust there, and Lee Dort, that we have a chance to take another step. And it's this team to get where they want to go, they're going to have to do that. I said the first year 10-3, 9-4. 9-4 is the worst they can do to have a chance to get to the tournament. And I don't know, Chris, you can answer this. Does it hurt worse? I mean, does it hurt, like, for instance, losing to Presbyterian obviously is horrible. But would it hurt worse to, say, lose to Memphis by 2 or 3? I know the margins doesn't matter. Or do you see us? Is it 10-3 a watermark that we need to be at?
I think one loss is sustainable, even a bad loss if you're a good team, right? I mean, you see teams like the other night, Michigan State lost to James Madison, which is better than anybody Vanderbilt's played, but losing to James Madison isn't going to keep Michigan State out of the tournament. That might cost them a seed line, but the bigger concern I have, they're plus 7 points against two teams that were picked in the bottom half, one of which was picked last in the I've already forgot, Big South. Yep. UNC Greensboro was picked 4th in the SoCon, which is a decent basketball league. But, I mean, you're plus 7 on those games. Right now what they are is they are a bottom half team if you could combine the SoCon and the Big South into one league. They're a bottom half team in that league. That's not a good place to be. My concern is the Presbyterian loss disqualifying for an NCAA tournament. My concern is if they're only plus 7 against those two teams, that's not even a discussion. Now, look, they don't have Lawrence. They don't have Van Allen Lubin. I get that. It's a different team when they're back. But, unless Tyron Lawrence is SEC Player of the Year caliber good, I don't think this is unless they get better as a team, I don't think this is going to matter.
Yeah, coming into the season, there were basically 9 games that I think were gimmies. The first 4 games, you had Western Carolina, Dartmouth, that's 6. San Francisco, I mean, you could say that's a gimme, but that's a game you should win. Boston College, a game you should win. Alabama A&M, game you should win. That's 9 games right there. Yeah. Can Vanderbilt get 9 wins in the non-conference? I think that's a big question, right? Those are challenging games that before the season you say, okay, an SEC team should go in and take care of business on their home court against whether it's a mid-major or a team out west like San Francisco, a not very good Boston College team, Western Carolina, an Ivy League team like Dartmouth. Those are teams Vanderbilt should take care of. But it has almost, Chris, become normal to, as a Vanderbilt fan, to become sort of scared late in these games about what might happen, and they're just, they looked better last night, but there's still not enough. I just don't think sense of urgency. And Joey and I talked about this. The step on your throat factor. Haven't seen that yet. Now maybe they get that back when you get Tyron, Van Allen Lubin, and Lee Dort back. We'll see. But you got to play without those guys now, and you got to survive.
Go ahead, Luke.
The other teams, I was noticing now that Chris has got me on this KenPom thing. There's the rest of the teams that we play are all top 55 or higher. Memphis, NC State, BYU possibly. So those teams, and San Francisco, I think is up there. So those teams, we got to at least win of this. I guess it's that would be 9 and of those games, we got to at least split them because that would put you at 10-3.
Yeah, I'm looking at KenPom this morning. They are 120 in KenPom. The teams they played: Presbyterian 263, USC Upstate 288, Greensboro 126. Central Arkansas at 333 is next. They've got an Alabama A&M at 340, Boston College is 125, so that's right on their level. Western Carolina is 130, right on their level. Then you get Memphis, Texas Tech, San Francisco, which is top 100. But for the season now, Ken Pom has got them going 11-19 in the league and 4-14 overall. And before everybody says, well, yeah, they had a bad start. They don't have Lawrence and Lubin. I get that. But preseason expectations are still baked in to a large degree to this point. So, they've slid pretty far down Ken Pom with 3 pretty mediocre performances. But that's the state of what the computer is telling us. Do I think they'll win more than 19? Probably. Or more than 11? Probably. But you gotta win a lot more than 11 to get anywhere
right
in the postseason. So that's what they're staring down. Just to give you an idea about the conferences, the Big South is rated as the number 22 conference so far out of 33. That includes independents as a league. I think there's just a couple of those. And the Southern is ranked 17th, so right at an average league or close to it, a little below average according to their metrics. So that's where they are. They are at this moment, they are a lower level team in below average conferences, but that's also without allegedly their star player. I would argue again that maybe Magnon's the best, but in any case, all right. Speaking of disappointing outcomes, football. And speaking of computers, I do a computer composite right now. With about 4 computers I use, they're mainstream, and they say this team is that many points above average, that many points below average. Vanderbilt right now is ranked, let me pull this up, from memory, I think 116 of the 133 teams. By far the worst of the Power 5 teams. I think they're 15 spots below Stanford. Guys, I'll tell you what, I was the one pumping the brake a little bit on expectations because I could see the weaknesses of this team, but I also thought the end of last year meant something. Maybe more than it ended up meaning, apparently. They're in a bad place right now. I don't think there's any way around it, Billy.
Yeah, I talked to a lot of people and, just kind of asking questions and, how does that happen, right? South Carolina is a team that, they're not the worst in the East. Vanderbilt's the worst in the East, but I mean, they're probably right in front of Vanderbilt, I would guess, as a team that has struggled this year. But, that's a good example, right? South Carolina has struggled, right? I think they're 4-6 now. Not, they haven't struggled to the level of Vanderbilt, but this has been a tough season for South Carolina. But they have a quarterback, right? They have a guy in Rattler that they can rely on. They have good receivers. Their defense, I think, is pretty good. They've got substantial foundational pieces that now their offensive line has not been very good, but they've got something they can rely on. Right now, Vanderbilt doesn't have anything they can rely on or cling on in terms of hope down the stretch of the season. Like South Carolina could go on and get close to making a bowl game here down the stretch. I think, with that offense and Rattler, Vanderbilt, and of course that's way out of the equation, but even 4 or 5 weeks ago, I don't think we were comfortable saying that. I think after that UNLV game, the issues were too deep rooted that there really was there was no hope, and that hasn't changed. And quite frankly, it's gotten worse somehow. I didn't really think it, like after, there was not a game where you went, oh, they gave up, they gave in, they quit, right? It felt like they packed it in that second half against South Carolina, and I didn't think I'd be saying that again, for a Clark Lee coach team. So, this is a big 2 weeks here to go into Knoxville and play with some pride, because if you get blown out like that in Knoxville, then that starts to hit the fans, emotionally, for the ones that are still invested somehow, that hits a little bit different. And so, I think Clark has to find a way to avoid that, because if he takes a team with him into Knoxville that fights and competes, I think that's you end the season with a better taste in your mouth. Now, is it even possible to end the season with a good taste? Who knows? But Chris, you're right. They're not in a good spot. And honestly, I don't really know what to say anymore. I mean, I know people listen to this to get answers. I think there's all kinds of people within this program that are also, sort of speechless or looking for answers. And like I've been saying, this offseason is going to be big. But yeah, South Carolina, Chris, that was a tough football game to watch in general, especially in that first half, kind of with the rain, kind of a slogfest. And Vanderbilt really couldn't do anything. I mean, offensively, defensively, the effort was poor. And Luke, I didn't think I'd be saying that, like I said, about this program ever, that the effort was poor. I think that's something that we never would talk about, right? The effort, maybe certain plays here or there, but overall, I don't think we ever really mentioned that a ton. But you can now, and that's an even bigger issue and an added issue that we hadn't really been talking about.
Well, guys, I've lived through this before, and what happens is this. You get, and I mentioned this a little bit, I think, the last time we were together. When you start, and it's the first time, you're right. First of all, let me go back to this. It's the first time I've seen effort being a problem, focus being a problem. Yeah, that was unacceptable. And I think Clark even mentioned it in his press conference, how gross it was. I mean, I have no issues with him taking 22 guys to Knoxville, and that's what I told him. Clark and I had a conversation after the game, and I said, Clark, you got to find 22 or a little few more that are willing to play football. This has happened before, guys, and here's my point. You have coaches that know they're on their way out. You have other people in the department that know they're on their way out, staffing. So if I told you tomorrow, you guys, okay, this is the last show we're going to do, I'm firing both of y'all tomorrow, I don't think this will be a very good show. And I think that's where you're at. And as a head coach, Clark gets all the blame, of course, as he should. He's the head man. But that's what you're facing. You're facing a fragmented football team. They're all in their little pockets, in their corners, in the sanctuary of the locker room. And you got some guys saying, well, I'm out of here. Why ain't I playing? We're not winning, so I should be playing. It's just it's a mess. So what you have to do is get through the season. As I've said before, and I said this a few weeks ago, the most important thing is not these last couple of football games. The most important thing is what happens in December and January. Because this has been an epic failure this season. So what do you do from there? You erase that chalkboard and start over again with some things, and you find out exactly what you have and what you thought you had.
We did not have a pre-podcast conversation to compare notes. So, and I think where Luke gets his stuff and where I'm getting some of mine on this are different places, but I think you nailed it. I think Vanderbilt's mascot, if you could have like a truth in advertising thing for the length of time that I've covered the program, should be Spider-Man. Spider-Man mean where everybody's pointing. That's been Vanderbilt's mascot for at least as long as I've done this, because when you have conversations with people about, well, are you thinking about firing so-and-so? Well, they say, no, we can't fire so-and-so because the problem is so-and-so. Well, then so-and-so's pointing back the finger at the person you were asking about, and then there'll be a third finger pointed somewhere else. And so you got this whole room of Spider-Man lookalikes that sit there all pointing the finger at the next guy. And the reasons are always plausible enough where you could believe any of them. That's how dysfunctional this has been for a while. I think it has filtered down to the football program at this point. There have been fingers pointed everywhere. I've heard them pointed everywhere. People have asked me what I've thought. I've tried to choose my words carefully here, and I've tried to choose my words carefully on the boards. That's why I've not said much, because once something is said, it cannot be unsaid. But yeah, finger pointing season is in full bloom with Vanderbilt athletics, and until they get out of that, I don't know how this ever changes for anybody.
Guys, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I asked him. I said, what's the biggest issue with this team right now? He said, well, hold on, what's not the issue? I mean, what isn't an issue with this program right now? It's just not as easy to say, well, the O-line has struggled, right? You can say that about some teams. I think you can say that about South Carolina, or they've been banged up at quarterback, right? They've got a young defense, right? You can't just say one or even two things. You got to, I mean, all year we've been talking about, it's been hard because we've had to mention 3 or 4 things within this team. And you said a word that caught me, Luke. Clean slate, start over, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether it's a full start over, full clean slate or not, that's a little, I think that should be a little scary, for the staff, for fans, just because, you have to do that. You have to do that in some form or fashion, just because of where you're at right now. And I think that heading into year 4 is sort of a scary proposition. Now, you talk about high risk, high reward. We've seen that work in off seasons, right? With teams, whether it's Colorado or Ole Miss, I think, had some impact transfers. I know that's not the off season yet, but we've been talking about it like it's the off season. Luke, that's the key phrase here. Impact transfers, in my mind. I think they need that. Of course, they've got young guys that'll play next year and play well, but impact transfers are key because those are the guys that are going to make plays and help you win games.
We all have short memories, and you look at the Derrick Mason situation. It was awful, went right out of the gate with Temple. And then Derrick made moves in his coaching staff.
Yeah.
And that's how. And then all of a sudden we're beating Tennessee 3 years in a row, go to 2 bowl games. And you had, but what did you have? You had a really, really good offensive coordinator in Ludwig.
Yeah.
And you had a solid, who number 1 quarterback was in Cal Shermer.
Mm-hmm.
So you had those things. And then all of a sudden Mason's a better coach than he was in the year 1, 2, and 3. So that's all it takes is to get that to work. Now, pushing the magic buttons and all that, you can't be wrong again, or it's over with in a couple of years.
Danger zone. That's what I'm thinking. And like I said, we've talked about huge off season, Chris. Like I've told Luke, it's going to be a more entertaining off season than the actual season. But I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. I think they need to be in the headlines, whether they're good or bad. I think fans want to see changes. Changes have to be made, right? Change is inevitable right now, and right now we just have to wait.
All right, gentlemen, we've got about 19 minutes left by my calculations, depending on how firm Luke's out is from now. And we got a ton of mailbag questions, more than we have time to get to. Billy, I'm going to have you sort through those and maybe pick the recurring themes and the most important ones and answer those. I'm going to guess we've got time to get to maybe 4 or 5 today under the circumstance. Our mailbag is sponsored by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, please give Taylor or Russell a call. That number 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Our guest line also sponsored by John Levin and the Maynard Nexon Government Contracts Group. Maynard Nexon advises government contractors on all aspects of their needs with a proud focus on matching legal solutions to business needs. Both those guys, we really appreciate their sponsorships. Billy, do I need to stall for a little more time?
No, you're good.
As you prepare the
ready.
Mailbag? Okay, I've got to step out for a brief second, so I'll tell you what. I'll have you ask the first question. I'll let you and Luke answer it first, and then I'll finish up when I'm back.
Got it. Here we go. Go Doors 94. That's where we're going to start here, Luke. This season has been pretty bad, but y'all have hinted at substantial changes that might be happening after the season, which you can't reveal. If the changes you expect are made, how will fans react to them? I'll start here. I think, all three of us pretty well aware of, have a good idea of what's going to happen in the offseason. I can't imagine being a fan that doesn't really have any idea about what's going to happen. But I think that, like we talked about, Luke, that's a good thing. I think fans should be excited about that. And I think at the end of the day, you should be excited about really any changes. Obviously an impact player, whether it's an edge rusher, right? You're just looking at the needs, right? I would say they need a couple of offensive linemen, maybe a couple of secondary players. I think they've got some bright future type guys in the secondary, so I think they're fine there. Maybe obviously a transfer portal quarterback could be an option. So I think they're going to be excited, Luke, but we won't fully know until we get into the year 4 season, right? Team 4. But overall, I think they should be excited, Luke. I mean, what else is there to be excited about, really?
No, excuse me. You're correct. The only thing that you can be excited about is waiting till next year to see if the changes that are made matter. Because you'll know that 4 or 5 games in. As tough as that schedule is going to be next year, if you beat 46-7 in those first 4 games, you got huge problems. So you're not going to know anything until next year. And you've got one part of the fan base that will be excited about certain people leaving. Some people have already made up their mind that Clark doesn't know what he's doing. He's an idiot and all that. So that portion of the fan base is going to still think that no matter what. So it doesn't really matter until we start playing ball games. You're correct.
Chris, I'm guessing you heard that question.
Yeah, I think the question was along the lines of, can people be excited about the changes? I think I have an idea where the subtractions will be. Not all of them, but I think I have a decent idea. I don't know what the additions are going to be. And here's the thing, guys. Let's just say they're coordinators. And I'm not reporting. I'm just saying that's where a lot of the fans' criticism have been aimed. I don't think they've been unfair. My concern for Clark is I feel like his coordinator hires so far have been underwhelming. And I don't know I don't know. I think Luke is a better person to answer this. Okay, let's say they make a change at coordinators. Is his Rolodex, for lack of a better term, it's an archaic term, I get it, but everybody knows what I mean when I say that, of coaching contacts and people that he has, that he can say, hey, come be my coordinator for X or Y. Is that list deep enough that it would excite people? And I guess I would say is if it is, why haven't we seen a different route by now?
Because the list isn't the problem. The problem is, will Vanderbilt allow him to pay them what those men are worth?
Okay. Yeah. Well, finger pointing season.
Perfect.
And I'm not making fun of your answer or Clark. I'm just saying that is why Spider-Man should be their mascot.
Right. I mean, a perfect example is Jesse Minter. Now, his first year was underwhelming at Vanderbilt, but we can see what kind of defensive coordinator he is when he has talent. He's had a successful run at Michigan. So he had Jesse Minter. Again, it's a university thing. It always has been. It was with Bobby Johnson. It was with Watson Brown. It was with a lot of folks. You know, they have their issues that they have to sort through, sure, as head coaches. But when you're spending a third of what everybody else is spending, and we talk about it, Vanderbilt does it in NIL. Vanderbilt has done it in transfer portal. They're always behind. You're always 10 steps behind everybody else. That's where it's got to change. That's why this offseason is so important. If they don't change it, then it doesn't matter.
Most important offseason, I know we say history of the program, but most important offseason since Clark has been here, right? And you know, we talk about all the time how, you know, coaches come in, coaches come out. I think they need impact transfers, right? I think they need impact coaches, right? You got to have coaches that pull everything out of guys. You're at Vanderbilt, right? I mean, you're not at Georgia, right? You're not at Alabama. You're not at LSU, right? I think James Franklin, Chris, did a good job of that, right? We have coaches like Herb Hand or certain defensive coaches that, you know, they were full of emotion and they pulled everything out. Not that there aren't coaches that don't on this staff, but certainly I think there are some changes that can be made and probably should be made. I had a point there. I forgot, but go ahead, Chris.
Well, while you're thinking about it, I'm going to ask Luke a question. And I'm just going to pick 2 coordinators off an elite team. And this is, people can say that's absurd. There's a point in here, and I'll get to it. Let's go back to Georgia 2 years ago. Or 3 years ago, whatever it's been, when I think their coordinators were Dan Lanning on the defensive side and Todd Monken on the offensive side, and those guys are elite coordinators. I don't know if Vanderbilt's ever had 2 elite coordinators at once, but here's my thing. You're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on the facilities. Going and getting penny ante coordinators is It's not going to be the answer. That's not going to solve anything. And it's going to be 2 years from now. If they do that, then everybody's going to say, well, Clark didn't have any good coordinators. So we don't know if this, but I've talked to people involved in decisions, and this is the game they play. They do not provide a guy with resources. And then 2 years later, they say, well, we didn't really provide this guy with resources. So we don't know whether we make a change or not. And here Vanderbilt Athletics sits in the same place year after year. Luke, I'm going to ask you, just hypothetically speaking, if you could go out and get Dan Lanning and Todd Monken level coordinators, what would you have to pay those guys to make them come work at Vandy under the circumstances where okay, I might lose my job in a year or two? What would that look like? And I know people are going to say that's absurd. Maybe you can't get them for any price, but I think that's where you got to aim. Otherwise, it's going to be the same thing a year or two from now. And I think that's the only way they pull this out of a ditch. Well, it's not the only way. There's a lot of other things that got to be touched too. But if we're talking coaching changes, they've got to go out and get him a big boy staff. And then if with the big boy staff it's not working, like where the blame goes. But I don't think that this, dip your toe in the water approach and go get whoever you can get for what little money you can pay them is going to solve anything and make anything better.
If you're able to go get anybody you want, and again, I'll make this comparison.
And let me one more thing. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think you just would have to assume that whatever Alabama or Georgia would pay them, you would have to pay a premium at Vanderbilt just because obvious reasons.
Well, that's my point. Again, if I ask you two guys to come to a team that's gone 2-10 and had a horribly underachieving season, and you say, okay, we're going to pay you $1 million or whatever it may be, they're going to say, guys, no, I need a 5-year contract and I need X amount of money. Is Vanderbilt willing to do that? Because again, it's not the list. You can get people to come if you pay them you know how it is, any amount of money. I'd have to pay you a lot of money to be the D coordinator at Vanderbilt or the offensive coordinator at Vanderbilt. I got to pay you a lot of money. And that's just to get a good offensive coordinator, to go get what you're talking about, the elite. I don't think they would come. I don't.
Even if it said just for $10 million a year.
Yeah, I just think you have to have a personal relationship with guys like that, because so many people have looked at Vanderbilt as, man, if I go there, that's one of the reasons Jesse Minter left. Now, obviously Michigan is a better job than Vanderbilt's job, but in his mind, he's thinking it's a risk to stay at Vanderbilt. It's not really go to Michigan unless you get caught stealing signs.
Well, and Chris, that's why I joined VandySports.com, because of all the money I was making.
Right. I mean, you can
joined,
go to McDonald's every day with what we're paying you.
All right, let's roll on here. Here's a good one from J.E. Moles. With Clark saying he plans to be more active in the portal after this season, is there any reason to believe the admin will facilitate this? And are they willing to be more flexible on the requirements to get accepted to the university like they did for Franklin? Good question. I mean, we've talked about that. The first one, with Clark saying he plans to be more active, is there any reason to believe the administration will facilitate this? Bart Simmons was on Commodore Hour. I guess it was maybe 2 months ago. And I don't know if he let it slip or what, but I think there was probably a reason to it. He said there have been some happenings here this season that have allowed us to be more active in the portal. And I was listening, and I kind of, I heard that, and I was like, whoa, that's not something small. I mean, to be more active in the portal, and whether that's school, whether that's collective, whatever it is. I think on the sports side of things, they're doing everything they can. Now on the school side, who knows? I mean, that's the answer I think people are looking for, right? Are they going to, become less stringent academically, because that is huge. I mean, that's massive, and they did do that during Franklin, but there's also a line you have to walk there, right? I mean, you're not, there's a type of kid that you bring in when you do that could damage your program, and that happened under Franklin. They also won games, so there's a line you got to walk. But Luke, I bring up that Barton quote, and I've heard it from other people too, that this is going to be an off season where they will start to change. Now, again, what does that matter? Does that end up mattering next season or in year 5? We'll see. But I think the effort, will be there.
Well, I'm going to give a Seinfeld analogy on the portal. Anybody can go to the portal. Anybody can pull out players. We have to identify first and then get them to come to Vanderbilt. That's, again, it's the same thing as hiring assistant coaches. The kid's going to say, well, my opportunity, I can go to Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, or Kentucky. Who's going to pay me more money to come? So we got.
Where can I play?
And I think that's where if you identify, okay, we need a stem winder, which if people don't know, that means a really good pass rusher. If you go out and you identify that guy and you say, okay, we'll give you $100,000 to come to Vandy. Kentucky and Ole Miss will look at him also, and they're going to give him $250,000. Where does it stop and where does it start?
That's a good point. And,
go ahead, Billy. I'm sorry.
That's what happened with Wisconsin.
Yeah, well, and that's happened. I mean, I'm not going to say that. Sit here, that happened with Ray Davis, but there's rumblings out there. But Chris, I mean, we've talked about that, right? Vanderbilt could offer a kid, and then right after that, maybe somebody at another SEC staff finds out, and they'll go, "Oh, let me go $500 more because we can."
All right, Luke, I'm going to push back on something you've said in the past, and it's not personal. It's just for way of illustration. Look, you've called when James Franklin had his run of things, you called it the sugar rush, that the conditions won't happen again. I call it what you need to do to win football games. Now, look, people that push back on Franklin got exceptions, that kind of thing, and look what happened. I don't think intelligence and morality correlate. I think there are awful, evil people who are very smart. I think there are really good people who are not that smart. I don't believe that. So I think the difference here is I think you've got a coach that's got a moral compass as compared to one in James, who I don't think had one. I think don't call it a sugar rush. Call it what you need to do to win football games. Because until they start doing the things that win football games and get more on the playing field with everybody else, I mean, if you just put them on level ground and other things, they're still at a huge disadvantage because people are going to look at it and say they have lost for 70 years now. It's like the whole NIL thing. Oh, wait a minute. You recruit me to go to Vanderbilt. I get to come. I get to lose a bunch of football games. I get to play in front of 20,000 other people's fans in my home stadium. I get to get my butt kicked. I have to go to class to the point of exhaustion. Oh, and you're going to pay me $10,000, but these guys are paying me $200,000. That's not a compelling case. That's not a compelling case. And until that stuff gets fixed, we're going to continue having the same podcast.
Let's look at how the sugar rush ended, okay? And I'm not saying he knew the situation with Brandon Vandenberg.
Well, he should have known.
He should have known. I was in the staff meeting when he was told the history of the kid, okay? So when you talk about James Franklin not being a sugar rush, I guess that's what your pushback is, that's the way it can be done. No, it can't be. It can't be because sometimes it gets to that point where you say, okay, I got a kid that can make the difference. He can get us to 9 wins, 10 wins. But he's borderline on his character.
Okay.
That's what happened there. And
okay.
That has affected Vanderbilt since to this day. That is
well. Let me be clear. I'm not arguing the character component. I don't endorse that. I wouldn't want my daughter going to a school where an athletic program enables conditions where something like that could happen. Let me be. I'm talking about the academic component because I think they push the academic component up too. And again, my argument would be, there's plenty of 18 ACT kids out there that I would love to date my daughter. There's a lot of 30s that I wouldn't let them in the door of our house.
Absolutely.
Luke, you ready for one more?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Let's see here. Here's a good one. We got a lot. And sorry, guys, if we don't get your question answered, we'll probably get that answered eventually. But Big Hatchie, how low is the bar? Say Clark hires new coordinators and goes 3-9 next season. Does he get a 5th year? And I think what we have to remember is this is Vanderbilt, right? We're talking about Vanderbilt. We cover Vanderbilt, and we're not covering Mississippi State. We're not covering Ole Miss or really any other SEC program. I mean, if Clark Lee, if any other school you go 2-10 year one, there's a good chance you're fired, right? But I think going in, Vanderbilt knew Clark Lee was, talk about the long, hard way, things like that, 10-year plan. There was sort of that built in. Whether that has accelerated or not, whether it's, year 5, no bowl game, I think there's reason to make a change there. I think we've talked about that. They go 3-9 next year. Yes, I think he will be there year 5. That's my gut. Should he? Again, that's a different question. Will he? I think he will. But Luke, we've talked about it. Year 5, that's sort of put up or shut up. As sad as it seems, that's just kind of where the program's at.
Yeah, I've argued with people on the board about it. They don't understand it, but it's a reality, and at Vanderbilt, at a lot of places, a lot of places other than Vanderbilt would fire a coach. For instance, like Arkansas. I don't know how long Pittman's been at Arkansas. How long has he been there?
Is it 3, Chris?
I think this is 4. I think.
4. Okay, so they what in their mind. And I know the athletic director at Arkansas. He has a fan base that cares. And let me say this real quick. When you have people showing up in only 5,000, and I know they're going to say, well, the product's terrible. That's why no one's there. Okay, that's fine. But it works both ways, guys. When you're expected to win in a place and they're going to tell you, you're not going to have any home games, first of all, coach. Everything's going to be a neutral site at best when you play an SEC opponent. You're going to be the road game on all 8 SEC games, by the way. You just get to play 4 of them in your stadium. So that's another thing that people don't even pay attention to. You have no support. That's different than just about any school in Division I.
Billy, I'll close this out because I think we're up against.
Yeah,
I got to go.
All right. I had earlier said I've got these composite rankings. I keep Vanderbilt's 114 out of 133 in those. 13.1 points below an average team, and this is a little sobering. It's just how it happens. Looking for the team that's exactly average, that's UNLV, which is ranked 65th nationally in this composite I put together. Vanderbilt and UNLV play on a neutral field right now. UNLV is a 13-point favorite over Vandy.
That's a good football team
that brings it's coincidental, but it brings things full circle. The worst team in the country, Kent State, 24.9 below average. So Vanderbilt, Kent State played on a neutral field right now. Vanderbilt being 11-point favorite. If you go to the next worst team, that's FIU, Mike McIntyre's team. Vanderbilt will be about let's see. About a good grief. 8-point favorite.
Wow.
That's how bad it's to me. Well, and here's where I'm going full circle. To me, it's not the record as much. It's how there are teams that are 2-9. You're like, man, they were that close. They were touchdown from beating Georgia, or lost on the last play to Missouri or whatever. You don't catch. This was not a team that didn't catch breaks. This is a team that just got slaughtered week in and week out. So I want to see it look better. Maybe they're 3-9 next year, but they're 70th in a ranking like this. To me, it's the record. I mean, look, if you're expecting them to have a winning season next year, just go ahead and fire them now, because that's not going to happen. If you can make improvements where they get more on the level of other teams, then maybe you got something that you can work with.
Yeah, good first step would be become a watchable product. Right? I think the last several weeks they just have not. No. So.
All right. I'll wrap us up here. We thank our sponsors. We thank Luke and Billy. VandySports.com. We got a lot more content there. Got a big announcement coming up in a couple of days that I think will be good for a lot of folks, and we'll bring that forward at the appropriate time. Thank you for listening and watching. Thank you to Luke and Billy for joining me. I'm Chris Lee of VandySports. This has been the VandySports podcast. Thanks for watching. God bless you all. We'll see you again soon.